All right, welcome back to day one of DrupalSouth Melbourne, the Drupal development track. We've got Richard from Salsa Digital about to talk to us all about feature recipes. On you go.
Okay, so today we're going to be walking through recipes, and we have a quick introduction. We're going to find out what are recipes, some problems that recipes are solving, recipes in Drupal core and Drupal CMS, and then we're going to delve more into how we can develop and author recipes, what are the secret powers of recipes, and we're just going to do a quick dive through a case study with civic theme and recipes and the future. Good morning. My name is Richard Gaunt. I work at Salsa as a technical lead. I've been working professionally with Drupal for over 10 years and as a hobbyist for 12 years. Thank you everyone for coming to my talk. A couple of caveats before I begin. I don't proclaim myself an expert with recipes, but I have been, delving into them and using them and working out how we can work with them in the future. So while I'd read about recipes before last year's DrupalSouth, it was really Chris Burgess's recipe presentation last year that got me thinking about how I can begin to use recipes within my development workflows. In that presentation, he mentioned that there were things that were still needing to be done before you could use recipes in day-to-day work. There is much good news to share on that front 1 year on. There's been a number of exciting developments of recipes last year in coordination with Drupal CMS release and Drupal 11, and I feel this year is the year we can begin to fully integrate recipes into our development workflows. That being said, there is a lot of development going on with Drupal recipes and the recipes API, but the foundations are in place to begin using it into your day-to-day, in your site development processes. I'm super excited about recipes and how it will change how we assemble websites and how it can be integrated into our day-to-day developer workflow. So I guess the best place to begin is a quick introduction / reintroduction, if you're already familiar, into recipes. So what are recipes? They're a lightweight solution to bundle and store functionality. There's no code written by a recipe author. Actions are configured in recipe YAML files. They can install modules, themes, configuration, and update your site's configuration and setup. They're designed to be composable and shareable. They're a one-time application to your website. You don't install recipes, you apply them. And finally, one of the stated goals of recipes is to replace installation distributions for the most part. So, what do we mean by lightweight? Recipes are configured. There's a YAML file. You write out what tasks you want to undertake in your recipe, and that's backed by an API within Drupal. And they're designed, I guess, to be joined together and composable. So, recipes are designed to provide an atomic block of functionality and split down, although you can go as monolithic as you want. Then in turn, you join these atomic blocks together and bundle them into recipes, and then join recipes into larger recipes, which are slowly you can build up into larger distributions and profiles, and basically mix and match the functionality as you author your recipes. Recipes are applied and not installed. What this means is you run a command, you apply the recipe to your site, and then after that, the recipe has no more connection with your website. The functionality of the recipe has become part of your site and part of your site maintenance and responsibility. And this just keeps it, I guess, a more simple interface than before. So in the past, with what did we have before recipes? We had profiles and we had, I guess, content modules. So generally in the past, when you wanted to create a site with a certain set of features, you would bundle up a set of modules and functionality within a site profile, which you could install on different sites as you did the development. The obvious problem with this was that you required a fresh site to install your profile on, so you couldn't bring it into an already existing website. The other issue was that once you had a profile and a number of sites using your profile, you suddenly needed to keep all those sites in sync, and just the problems with different sites wanting different things running at the same time. One of the other guess, solutions to this issue of bundled functionality was running content modules and things like that. So if one site wanted an article or its own content type, you would bundle up the config within that module. You'd enable the module to get your config installed, and then you either disable and throw away that module, or you'd have to keep that module sort of running. One of the things that, I guess, if you've ever done it before, is that you would have, I guess, config collisions, like the field might already exist within your website and you couldn't install that functionality, and you had to sort of juggle around shared config and work out, I guess, having a core module to sort of store shared config just to get your content into that website. And it was quite a complicated developer process. And so recipes have been designed to sort of replace that sort of work for the most part. Now, I guess the first question is that where are we at with the recipes, the feature? And the good news is these were released with Drupal 10.3, which is almost a year ago, I believe. They're no longer experimental, and so today you can use recipes on existing websites. It's fully functional with Drupal 11, and there's a couple of extra features that have been added in. And the exciting news is, or one of the exciting pieces of news is the standard installation profile has been converted to recipe format, which I'll go into detail a little later. And the other exciting bit is that recipes underpin many of the advanced features in Drupal CMS. So Drupal CMS has come out, and I don't think very many presentations today can avoid talking about Drupal CMS. And I guess Drupal CMS was brought out with a goal to be a goal for Drupal CMS to be the gold standard for no-code website building, which was Dries' quote announcing Drupal CMS. Its goal is to provide a no-code website builder for ambitious site builders. These are site builders who are happy to play around with Drupal in the UI and try and build out a website without any development help. And recipes underpin a lot of these actions within Drupal CMS. And we're going to look into how that all works very shortly. Okay, so Drupal CMS provides two entry points to recipes via the UI. If you start up a Drupal installation, you encounter recipes before you even begin installing the website. And after you've installed your website, there's the project browser module, which you install, which gives you a browser mode where you can pick and choose recipes to install on your site. And so I've got a little demo of, I guess, the first part of the screen. And so we've now come to Drupal CMS. This is the installation screen, which is an evolved installation setup, starter installation setup to Drupal. You can now choose a set of recipes, which are indicated up there, blog, case studies, events that you might want to install as you install Drupal CMS. So in this case, I'm going to click on blog in a second. Soon. And I can install the blog content type after I've entered in my standard Drupal installation of site name and user. And this will become part of my site as I install it and install a content type. So, sorry, I speed this up just to get us through it. Although it's pretty quick I think it's 1:30 on my local to go from start to end. Okay, so once you've installed your Drupal CMS site, you come to the admin screen, and now we're just going to look at what has been installed since we've selected blog. So the first thing we're going to go and see is we're going to try and create a blog content type. Sorry, timings are slightly off. And as you can see, all the fields and the form has already been set up and installed with recipes. So we have that sort of baked in. And then we also, the recipes also installed a listing page with a set of the blog posts we've got there. And finally, the recipe has installed some sample content. It's created one blog post with all the fields filled out so you can see, so that content authors can see how to actually edit and create blog posts in this case. So that brings us to the next sort of question is that recipes have been designed to be shareable and discoverable. Contributed recipes can be found on Drupal.org, published in the same way, same pattern as Drupal modules and themes. They're hosted as Drupal projects and installed via Composer or downloaded and installed manually. And more recently, with the alpha release of recipes, they can be installed via the UI. This means that they're highly discoverable. They can have issues and updates added with modules to Drupal.org so they can support and fix bugs with recipes as well. So there's a whole ecosystem to link into and find recipes. Alrighty, so just a super quick overview of installing recipes without the UI. It's a standard sort of Composer, including a project. You run the command there, require whatever the thing is, and on the right-hand side, perfect, you can read it. It has the Drupal CMS Composer JSON, and you can see that the recipes underpinning Drupal CMS are all individual packages downloaded from Drupal.org. Alrighty. Now we've installed the site. I mentioned earlier there's a second way which we encounter recipes through Drupal CMS, and that's through the project browser section. You go to extend your site, and then you click on recommended up the top, and this is all powered by the project browser alpha release. The major release at the moment hasn't brought this in, but this is what's on Drupal CMS. And now we can see all of the recipes we have available to us in Drupal CMS. So you can select, click a button, and it'll install. As you can see, we've installed the blog one already. It keeps a record, and I'm going to install Google Analytics and see what happens from there. Now, this kind of brings us to another interesting feature within recipes, is that they have, a form API which you can configure in a YAML file to get user input from users before you actually install the module. And so you can see there I added a tag, and then I hit install, and it then installs the required modules and config. Same again with AI. We've got a different form where you can select your provider and you can enter your API key, and then it will install the recipe. So it's quite a powerful site builder experience. Yeah, that's it. So, alrighty. So I've sort of covered the UI section of the presentation where site builders can hook into recipes and use them. And now I guess we're going to look at ways, the very like into how recipes work, a high level look at their API and what they do. So what do I need to have a recipe, and what does a recipe need to have for it to be a recipe? The required things, and on the right hand side I've got the blog post recipe I installed through Drupal CMS, so you can see what kind of files you need on the side. The required though is a directory in the recipes folder. There's two folders. If you want to explore core recipes, core has its own recipe directory with all the installed recipes there. But if you want to create your own or download contrib recipes, they go to a /recipes folder, which is at your root directory. Now, the second thing you need is a recipe YAML file. Now, this is the configuration of a recipe. You need a recipe YAML file to tell it what to do and to orchestrate the recipe. And then it comes with a series of other optional artifacts and components. You can have a config directory similar to your module config directory, where you can store your pre-built config to install with your recipe. You can have a Composer JSON specifying packages you want downloaded. I've had to play with it on Drupal CMS locally, and I couldn't quite get it to work successfully, but I think there's probably more a problem with my local environment using DDEV rather than issues with the module, but you may have more success. And finally, there's a content directory. One of the other features I with that blog post was I was able to bundle up sample content, and you can do the same with your recipes to provide starter content. So I guess the second stage is that's how we, like in the overview of how we configure a recipe. What happens though when I run a recipe? First of all, it's applied with the drush command, drush recipe, and then you send it the path to your recipe. And what happens once it starts running? There's a certain order that takes place with your recipe. There's a class behind it called recipe runner, which handles the order of execution. And this runs through the series. It first looks for bundled recipes within your recipe, and then it goes and installs those recipes. It then installs modules and themes that you've indicated you want to install, and it then runs config imports and config actions. And I'll cover this more in detail shortly because this is an exciting piece. And then it imports provided configuration, and it then also creates default content. And so that's effectively what a recipe does when it runs, depending on what options you've set up. Okay, so I've talked about what are the artifacts. I've told you what tasks it will undertake. How do I actually author a recipe and what's involved in it? I've mentioned about 3 times already that it's powered by YAML and configuring a YAML file. So you need your recipe.yaml file. Inside this YAML file, I'll just run through it. I've just copied the blog, the Drupal CMS blog thing. At the top, we have the metadata of name, type, and description. Name is your human readable, which is what Project Browser shows. Description, again, provide a description for your recipe. And then there's a type, which isn't currently used in any projects, but I've read around that it's going to be used within Project Browser to have categories of recipe. And also there's I think a naming convention being developed for what type of recipe you have. And so that's the key areas of a recipe. You can have a recipe just with that, but it won't do anything. We then work our way down, and as we mentioned before, you can compile and compose your recipe with other recipes. So we have a recipe section. You can see here that there is the add content by bundle. A Drupal CMS page. So it will install the basic page recipe for Drupal CMS, which in turn is its own content type, its own fields being installed, and any other associated config it wants to install. And you can make it up with many different recipes, and we'll run into a more complicated recipe shortly and just seeing how larger things work, but this one's just got the one recipe it wants to install. We're then moving down. We have, you can then install modules and recipes. So you just write out your modules below and themes that you want to install, and Drupal will go through and install each one. There's a little different to enabling a module or enabling a theme through Drush as you might normally do it. By default, and we'll cover this in more detail, the configuration entities that are bundled with modules and with themes aren't created by default, and we'll go into detail why that is as we head down through the recipe configuration, just to keep that in mind. So after we've installed a set of modules and themes, we have a config section, and a lot happens within this section. You list all these sorts of actions that you can import configuration, you can modify, update, change existing configuration, and all this is backed by an API, which we'll look at shortly. And as I mentioned before, you can also have composer.json, content directory, and other things. But alrighty, so that's a recipe.yaml file. I sort of just alluded to it, but there's a couple of secret powers that recipe have that lie beneath this, which add, I guess, the flexibility of recipes. Is that number one, it's been bundled with a config action API. Now, this is an API that enables recipes to update and modify a configuration that is going to be installed. It provides a configurable API, and my amateur opinion is it's similar to the migration process API in that you plug in different plugins and you change things as you add them in. It allows powerful modifications through YAML, and it's well supported in core. I guess config actions in core, they cover a wide range of different actions you might want to undertake when you're installing a piece of functionality. There are over 30 different types of config actions that you can plug into your recipes, and there are more coming into development as the recipe API matures. Some of the more common actions and some simple examples is like updating configuration settings within config. There is turning off unwanted blocks on a new site install, or enabling your theme. You can add permissions to specified roles. You can add permissions to all the content types and to all the roles available. There's a lot of flexibility in adding permissions as you install functionality. And there's adding config if it doesn't exist, but not adding it if it does exist. Setting third-party settings, setting display components in your display views. There's a lot of things going on, and there's a whole list of all of those outlined in depth on the link below. And so there's a lot going on there. It may not cover all the types of config you want to modify and how you want to modify it, and that's where you can create your own config actions. There's a plugin framework that you can create your own plugin classes so that you can tie in your own recipe, own config actions and development, your specialized ones for your site install or your particular development workflow, and also ones that, and obviously ones if you want to contribute back, are available as well. So you can fill in all the gaps that you want with these. So I guess there's a little bit of code and recipes. Alrighty, on to the recipe secret power number 2. It's the ability, we saw it before, it's the ability to take input in from users. There's an API called the Input API, and this enables you to ask for input from users against configuration. You can ask them for input, as we saw before. On the right-hand side, I have the AI recipe configuration, and if you can read it, it looks better up there than it does on this screen. But basically, it's asking for what you can. If you're familiar with the form API, you can see that there's a form element there, and it uses the form API to ask questions in the UI. Within the CLI, sorry, it's a bit technical, but there's a Symfony style input, and you can basically configure either the drush command to ask questions or the configuration form we saw through Project Browser to get the input you see. Now, this enables you for input, and you can update the config based on inputted names, like field names you can do, but there are certain limitations to what you can do with the input. It doesn't. You're not able to, as I've read, choose your own event with a recipe. The recipe is meant to be specifying what gets installed. You can't choose based on inputs what parts of a recipe you want to install. It's I guess part of the point of keeping it simple. Alrighty. So this brings us on to another point I quickly mentioned earlier, is the Drupal 11 standard site installation profile has been implemented in recipes. The standard profile is being split into atomic recipes. There are recipes for content types, a basic page, and articles. There is the content block setup, editor text formats, all the performance, maintenance, admin settings, modules enabling which you get through standard profile have all been broken out into functional recipes that you can now pick and choose and reuse in your site installation profiles, which is, in my opinion, kind of exciting. This is to do a quick run through of what the standard profile and what a fully like a complicated recipe might look like, and this is the standard profile for that. So as you can see again, the metadata at the top, and then you can see all the different recipes that the standard profile uses to install the standard what you get when you normally start up your Drupal site. As you can see, there's a lot of different pieces, and what this means is that you can take those pieces and use them as part of your installation profile, which is kind of exciting. I mean, for me personally, one of my standard tasks is to install standard profile and then disable blocks that I don't want in my theme. With this atomic sort of recipes, this enables you to pick and choose what you want for your particular recipe and what you want installed on your Drupal website, and be able to just, I guess, stand on the shoulders of core contributors and this work. After you've installed all those recipes, it then provides a whole set of modules which support the standard profile, views, menu UI, etc. Toolbar, of course, and then it heads into the config section, which we touched on earlier. So just to give a quick rundown of configuration options, the first thing you'll counter up there is the strict key. This is one of the flexible parts of recipes. You'll note here that the standard profile has set that as true. This means it won't install if there's existing config that doesn't match the config exactly in your recipe. So this is, I guess, similar in that it will check the configuration entity, but if it's different, it will just stop the recipe. But in this case, you're starting with a fresh site because this is a site profile. It's been set to strict because it shouldn't expect anything else. And then if we go below the import section, this is where we can import. We mentioned before, when we enable modules and themes, it doesn't import any configuration entities. Configuration entities being fields, views, anything complicated except for basically your module or your theme settings files and other flat YAML files. And this in turn tells Claro to turn on the block for help, sets up some blocks for search, imports image styles that standard profile wants, creates the views like content view for your admin screens, etc., and then works through that. And then it hits the actions, the config actions section, which we touched on earlier with that API, and carries out a set of updates to existing config. So just starting at the top, we can see it does a simple config update, which is just updating an individual value in a configuration. It updates, I believe, the node edit screen to use the admin theme, and then moves down and adds and sets the front page to /node. It then grants a whole stack of permissions to different roles. And this is obviously how you can compose and build your own recipe and make sure that every time you create a new content type, all of your permissions are set up appropriately. But and then that's right. And then that's, I guess, the standard profile. So after, I guess, going through how Drupal core uses recipes, I began to think about our development workflow. I'm the tech lead for the Civic Theme project, and I saw, Civic Theme has the opportunity to begin to harness these recipes. We do, so what Civic Theme is, in case you don't know, is it's an open source design system used in more than 30 government sites. It has multiple build configurations across Drupal 10, 11, and Drupal CMS. We support all these platforms, and so we build a lot of sites and tests with a lot of different site setups for Drupal with Civic Theme. Our current build system is using a series of scripts and modules to build the site, including content modules I discussed before, a lot of enabling of modules that we need for Civic Theme. There's custom scripts to speed that up. Basically, I saw this complicated, I guess, project and build system can be simplified and harness the recipe API for us, for our development, but also for sites that want to use Civic Theme and want to get it set up quickly. We can reduce the setup instructions from a page of commands and scripts to run to just applying a simple recipe. So the first thing I sort of stepped into, given that background, is a site installer script for installation profile for Civic Theme. And not a profile, a recipe. And so the goal was to make installing Civic Theme on a fresh site as easy as running one command. we want to do the following. Utilize the standard profile provided recipes. We want to install Civic Theme, obviously. We want to import the necessary configuration, which comes along with Civic Theme. And we want to replace the need for running standard installation profile and then disabling sections of that after we've done that. And so we basically wanted to bring the goodness, the pieces we want for standard profile into Civic Theme. And we wanted, I guess, a simplified way of installing it. Alrighty. So what is our recipe composition for this project? What we've done, and this is in development, we have a pull request which we're working on. Basically what we've done is we've selectively used recipes from the standard profile, but not all. We've been able to use bits and pieces. We've automatically installed theme dependencies, which was an unexpected side benefit of installing with recipes. If you've used Drush before to enable a module, you'll find that you need to enable manually and separately your accompanying dependencies, module dependencies. And we've able to selectively import configuration from contrib modules and from standard profile on what we need in Civic Theme. So I'll go through that in a second. And we've obviously created the Civic Theme content types, vocabularies, paragraph types, and more, which you expect that come with Civic Theme. So what does this recipe actually look like? It's quite simple. This is it in its entirety. Starting at the top, we have a recipes key. We've used a whole series of core recipes which we've brought in, and this is how you bring in core recipes into your custom recipe. We're creating a basic block type. We're bringing in the recommended performance modules like page cache and all these other performance related ones. The maintenance like cron and logging, I think is in that one. The admin, we're activating the admin theme for Drupal, and we're creating an administrator role. So these are, we've brought in those things, and then we move down to the install, and we install Civic Theme. Again, as I mentioned before, it doesn't bring in the bundled configuration. We do this below, and I'll just show you how. So moving on to the config section, we've selected what config we want to import. We want all of the shortcut because Civic Theme depends upon it. We want the media entity view mode. We want some form view modes for the media library. And finally, at Civic Theme, I've used the star wildcard, and that means I want everything from Civic Theme to be installed, which is what we want. And then finally, we have one simple action. We update the default theme of the system to use Civic Theme. And that's effectively it. So on to the next. So one of the learnings I picked up when I was looking to make an easy system for people to install Civic Theme on Drupal CMS was a site install recipe doesn't work with an existing site. You need to adapt certain things for what already exists within an existing site. And so I had to adapt the Civic Theme site install to work with Drupal CMS. So there's some slight differences working away from the top. You can see I'm only including one of the core recipes, the basic block type, which Civic Theme requires and isn't installed in the Drupal CMS installer. I'm running a little pre-install recipe just as a small bug with enabling layout plugin bugs I got to look into. And then I install Civic Theme itself. And then I just run through the config section, bring in the same config we had before for the media library and media and the shortcut. But then I have a series of different actions because there already is an existing site. The major action you'll see there, all the blocks, setting the status action. I'm turning off all of the Drupal CMS front-end blocks that I don't want to see in my Civic Theme website. So I'm turning off help, main menu, messages that are all provided, and breadcrumbs that are provided by Civic Theme with its library. So so one of the learnings was that needed different recipes for different purposes and different stages in your site development. So I touched on it earlier, but one of the quick and easy wins with recipes and removing modules is you can utilize the default content API in Drupal core and with the Drush to provide default content for your site. Civic Theme runs a number of showcase websites for higher education, government, and industry, so people can see what Civic Theme looks like with different themes. And we've utilized default content to provide that content. These modules can be moved straight into recipes, and you no longer need those modules to store that data, and they can be installed with the Drush recipe command. So and you keep them up to date as you did previously. You just point to the folder you want to export your content to. So that's a kind of an easy and exciting win with recipe APIs, and we can replace those default content modules you might be using. Alrighty, and that's the recipe. Like, I've installed a couple of modules that I needed, but you don't need to, it's this simple. Okay, so I've created, I guess, a site installation script for Civic Theme, which brings in everything with Civic Theme and installs it. But what would the future of recipes be with Civic Theme? And I guess one of the pieces of feedback that we've often received with Civic Themes that brings in batteries and all to your website, everything gets installed, which works great when you want a starter kit, but perhaps you want different things in your website. And so potential end goals with Civic Theme recipes would be splitting Civic Theme site install into composable recipes in a similar way to how standard profile works. And we can, bring in different content types with different recipes, so that the base Civic Theme potentially doesn't bring that in. And you can choose like what you install, and maybe we can bring in different flavors of Civic Theme, different content types for different use cases, and you can run and install your recipe for bringing in different components to your website, and so you don't clutter it up with things that you don't want and what configuration you don't need as well. So that brings me to my end. I've got references I'll share out. There's a lot of good documentation. There's a couple of other good presentations out there, which I'll share via Slack, I guess, was probably the place to do it. Alrighty, that's it. Questions?
We've got a few minutes for questions, so if anybody's got any burning recipe-related things they want to find out from Richard,
yeah,
let us know.
Also here the whole week, or today and tomorrow, and yeah, come find me and talk recipes, talk your ideas. Or
just wondering, Richard, if let's say you had a base sort of content type, and I'm thinking of paragraphs, and you wanted to break paragraphs into individual recipes for the type of paragraph.
Yep.
But if you're using like a field that's letting you place those paragraphs on a content type.
Yep.
Can you do it where you can make each of the paragraph types be a recipe, but also enable them on the content type just based on what you...
That was my first question of the recipe when I was exploring it.
Do you want to just paraphrase?
Yes, so just for everyone, the question is, you have an entity reference field with a series of paragraphs in it, or any other content types that you haven't got on your website yet, and you are installing a content type recipe onto your website. How do you get your entity reference fields updated? Now, I haven't found anything with the core config actions yet. There is an issue, and I've actually began writing some code for it, but I decided to write my presentation rather than get a core patch in. But there's an action to create updates to already existing sites. So often you have arrays of data, and the simple config action before only allows you to override a value. There's an issue out there which is coming and in development, which allows you to have an array action on an existing config. So you can add elements to an end of an array, slice, and I don't know, there's a whole series of array actions they want to bring in to be able to do those more complex changes, which is precisely the blocker I found with the future of Civic Theme recipes, and what I was aiming for was exactly that. So, great question.
Alex.
Thank you so much, Richard. It was really interesting presentation. With config development, there's a config_develop module, I think, with recipes. Is anything like that that helps you to develop recipes?
Not that I've seen. And there might be, if anyone knows. It's often someone that does know. There's a really good annotated example and documentation, which I'm leaning on with my explanation for recipes quite heavily, and that's in the Markdown documents that I've linked. There's a whole set of documents there which are really easy and really useful. So tell me.
How do you validate that the recipe contains all the required fields, or is there any other tools to validate that? Just guessing.
Yep, so when you apply your recipe, there's actually other recipe APIs I haven't touched on today. There's a checkpoint API, which means if your recipe fails halfway through, it reverts back to the original state. So you can then develop your recipe. And you'll find if you have, as you noted with the shortcut, installing shortcut and all this other configuration, I discovered all these shared dependencies from Civic Theme that we're already sort of relying on when we installed those modules. And so when I developed the Civic Theme recipes, I had to sort of apply the recipe, fail, and it'd say like you're missing these dependencies, and then I knew what to bring in. And so it's kind of handy that way, because you can then work out what you actually need in your site to get your feature running. The reason why I sort of mentioned that the Civic Theme one is under development is I'm probably missing some config entities which we all rely on and we sort of all expect from our standard profile installation, which I haven't figured out I'm missing yet, because it's just been QA'd by me as a developer rather than through the standard QA process. So yeah, that's effectively how you do it, but there's no validator script. It's applying, and the idea with recipes is you can continue to apply them, and you should get the same result at the end each time you apply it. So it shouldn't. So basically, as you develop it, you can apply, make a change, apply, and you don't have to do a whole database refresh to work out what was missing, which is what I found in the past with other.
If someone does want to build that tool, they can call it Test Kitchen. You're welcome.
Oh, nice.
There was one more question up the back, I think.
Quick question, thanks Richard.
Yeah.
How do you handle changes to your profile? Like, what if you decide Civic Theme now does need the help block? How do you propagate that to the people that have already installed Civic Theme?
Yeah, exactly. So within the recipes API, and part of what makes it simple is it's applied once and then thrown away. There's no update hooks with recipes. So if we want to do updates in Civic Theme, we have a hook. Is a theme. We have a post deploy, I forget at the moment in the lights, hook system where we update fields and we provide a programmatic way of changing things within the system. It'll be the same with the recipes. There's nothing stopping you from having update recipes as well, and I haven't really explored that, but potentially that might become a thing to install the latest parts of that, and you could potentially do that, because with the install system, when you install the module, if it's already installed, it continues. You can then selectively import newer config entities that you might want. So maybe it's another recipe, but I haven't deeply looked into that yet.
And what we just spoke about with being able to update bits of things rather than overnight.
Yeah.
Make that a lot easier.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So I hope that answers.
Is there a recipes PHP module that allows you to run PHP?
I'm going to stop it here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a strong urge to try and keep recipes as simple as possible. But with the config actions API, I'm sure there might be some creative actions being undertaken by people.